I'm Megan. I am an undergraduate researcher in the lab, and we are on the outreach team, which is how we got the awesome job of being your hosts today.
All right, so as Megan said, my name is Durga Sridharan. I am also an undergraduate researcher here in the lab, and I am your other MC for the day. So right now we're just gonna do a quick run through on the agenda for today. So first we have a keynote and a guest speaker, which is Dr. Okun, and we will have that here in the main session. After that, around 2:30, we will switch into breakout sessions where we will be having undergraduate and graduate research presentations. And then after that, we will come back here to the main session for the remainder of the forum, and we will have Chirayu present his video and his project entitled The Storm. And then we will recognize our seniors in the lab and then finish off with some announcements and just a brief conclusion.
All right, so really quickly before we get into our exciting guest speaker, hopefully we're hoping that there will be some time at the end for some questions. Dr. S is going to be moderating the questions, and we ask that you put anything into the chat box. So don't unmute and ask, please type questions into the chat box. And basically, we're not gonna have time to answer all of the questions today, but we are hoping to get everyone who asks a question an answer at some point from Dr. Okun. So even if your question isn't answered right now, you'll get an answer eventually. So now I would like to go ahead and introduce Dr. Michael Okun. So Dr. Okun received his MD with honors from the University of Florida, and he is currently the chair of neurology, a professor and executive director of the Norman Fixel Institute for Neurological Diseases at the University of Florida, their Health College of Medicine. Dr. Okun has also served as the National Medical Director for the Parkinson's Foundation since 2006. He has an active research career exploring non-motor basal ganglia brain features, and among all of those and many other accomplishments, he is also a published poet and author, and his book, Parkinson's Treatment, 10 Secrets to a Happier Life, was translated into over 20 languages. And recently, in 2020, he published another book, Living with Parkinson's Disease, a complete guide for patients and caregivers. And we're going to go ahead and put the links to both of those chats in a minute link to both of those books in the chat so you guys can check those out. And with that, we would like to give a warm welcome to Dr. Michael Okun.
Well, thank you. I super appreciate it, and it's great to be with you all today. And I live in Florida, and we are about an hour, I don't know, about 2 hours away from Disney World, so north of Disney World. And one of our best ever graduate students was Elizabeth Stegmuller, who is extremely talented and awesome, and was awesome when she was here, and did a lot of great papers and research work, and she's far exceeded everything we could have ever hoped for what she's built there. And we see all the pictures of all the students that she's trained and been training, and you couldn't have picked a better mentor. So I think the program is in great hands there at Iowa State. I wanted to just spend a few minutes today talking a little bit about a couple of things that I'm passionate about, and both the idea that we have lots of people living with Parkinson, and then this idea of what it takes to end a disease, and the path forward for that, and just maybe challenge you a little bit and give you 15 or 20 minutes here to fire you up a little bit before you get into your hardcore research for the symposium. So thanks for inviting me. I'm going to try to share my screen here. Okay, well, great. Well, so it's great to be with you all here. It's always an adventure with Zoom technology, but it does allow us to get together. So I'm super grateful for that, and super grateful for the invitation to speak. funded by the National Institutes of Health and several other foundations, and nothing I'm going to tell you today is in conflict, and in full disclosure, I don't receive any money from any pharmaceuticals or device companies directly that I put in my pocket, and the books I'll tell you about, all the proceeds go to charity. This is where I live in Gainesville. This is our new Fixell Institute for Neurologic Diseases. So if you're headed down south from Iowa, usually people that come from the central US will head down Interstate 75 and end up on the west coast of Florida. And people that come from New York will end up on 995 from the East Coast. But if you come from Iowa and you drive down, you're going to drive right through Gainesville on your way to Disney World. So feel free to come by and see us, and we're happy to say hello. We have a blog post that we put up, lots of information. Elizabeth wrote a blog for us, where we try to get a lot of conversations going. And today on the World Parkinson Congress website is Twitter takeover. So I've taken over the Twitter. And so if you want to see some of the fun we're having today, feel free to get on there. And you just have to tweet my name. These are the two books, Ending Parkinson Disease and Living with Parkinson. And the original title of Ending Parkinson Disease was actually the Parkinson pandemic. And it turns out that about 8 years ago, when we were writing on another work called 10 Secrets to a Happier Life, we wrote a prologue to that book and talked about how the numbers are exploding so fast that this could be a pandemic, and probably not a good idea to mix it up with the World Health Organization and infectious causes, but it is something that we're pretty passionate about, trying to think this through, because the numbers are starting to become really, really large, and so it's something that I think we need to really pay attention to.
We have done the impossible before. The suffering we experienced, it pushed us forward. It did not stop us. Stigma was there. Our brothers and sisters marched on the streets until it wasn't. The challenge inspired us. Together, we rose to the occasion. We fought back. And we will do it again. We will end Parkinson's. Our fight begins now.
So we started a red card campaign, and some of you may have mailed red cards, to the White House. And we've been asking for three things, and one is to ban certain chemicals that are associated with the later onset of Parkinson, like Paraquat and Trichloroethylene, or TCE. Another is to make sure that we consolidate our gains in telemedicine and that we don't lose all those gains that we made. People don't understand that just because of COVID-19, we're able to see people in their homes now with telemedicine, but that's not going to be permanent unless we make it a permanent law. And we've been fighting for that for over a decade. And then third, we need to increase our research investment by at least 10 times. So how big is the problem here? Well, it's now the fastest growing neurological disorder on Earth. And we just had a meeting with the World Health Organization. They've become involved in this because of a lot of the data that's showing this is going to be a real problem. 1 in 15 people over a lifetime will get Parkinson, and that's a lot. That should really, pause. It should give you pause to think, if you were in a classroom of 30 people, that 2 of those people in that classroom during their life are going to get Parkinson's disease. That's a pretty high prevalence. And if we project out and we look at the projections, we know from 1990 to 2015, the numbers of cases of Parkinson's disease actually more than doubled. And then from 2015 to 2040, they're going to more than double again. And this means if we don't pay attention to what's going on here, this could really stress our healthcare systems. It's going to cause a heck of a lot of suffering for people. And in some cases, it could even collapse healthcare systems or health plans or access to care. And so these numbers are really starting to grow fast. And you can imagine that, that there needs to be intervention. And many people have thought that the numbers of Parkinson cases are increasing only because people are getting older. And you see, look at the lifespan of people that lived in 1850 was slightly under 40 years old. One of the greatest advances, if not the greatest advance of science, is nearly doubling that lifespan. Now, we know when we did the research for the book, Ending Parkinson, A Prescription for Action, that it turns out that age is only one factor, but it's not the only factor. And so there must be other things that are going on that are driving this growth. Now, there are some myths that we came across as we were coming through with the book. So important to always talk about myths with Parkinson. So it's all due to aging. So I want everybody here to know that that's not a truth, okay? That it's not treatable. Actually, there's quite a few treatments that both medical and surgical and also interventions in the clinic and exercise and other things that can be prescribed. And it is quite treatable in many of its conditions, and that there's nothing that can be done about risk. Now, this would fly in the face of all the information that we have about all the treatments and all of the epidemiologic risk studies, which we didn't pay attention to 20 years ago. But then when we see study after study showing us that if you're exposed to something very specific, and then you have a higher risk of coming down with Parkinson later, now we've begun to pay attention to this. So early in my career, we paid no due to that. So when we were looking through and doing the research and trying to figure out how to put this book together, we realized that there's a formula for success of any disease. So if you want to end a disease, you've got to employ the right strategy. And we call that strategy a PACT. And PACT stands for P for prevent, A for advocate, C for care, and T for development of new treatments. And this could apply not just to Parkinson, but to other diseases. And when we studied this, we took a lot of time looking at diseases like HIV and diseases like breast cancer. We took a look at polio, which is pretty interesting because now everybody talks about polio with the current pandemic. So if you're going to prevent a disease right now, and we try to think about that prevention area, probably the area where we could make the most progress right now is in the environment, because we know that certain environmental toxins are associated with a later occurrence of Parkinson. We know less about using other things like exercises and rehab and drugs and devices. That may come later, but there's some immediate things that we can do right now. And we know from the numbers and from the data that we should be banning specific pesticides, and we should be banning specific chemicals, and we should be acting on the information that we have on these. And now the pesticide with the strongest link to Parkinson is Paraquat. It's been banned in 32 countries, but in the United States, its use has actually doubled in the last 10 years. And you can see in the gray here, these bars, and I don't want to get too scientific here, but you can see it's growing and growing and growing and the problems getting worse and worse. And then you can see on the heat map here, you can pick out where Iowa is there, everyone. And you can see Iowa is right in the center of, where all that paraquat is being sprayed. Now, pesticide and any side, C-I-D-E in Latin means killer. So it's if you're killing a pest, it's pesticide. If you're killing a fungus, it's fungicide. And so you know what that word means and what the derivative is. And you have to ask yourself where you live when it comes to the environment. Like my house is 11 miles from a Superfund site. Now, Superfund sites are areas where there's been spills or there's something in the environment that needs to be cleaned up. And in that Superfund site, there's dioxin, what's part of the pesticide called Agent Orange, actually the herbicide called Agent Orange, that was sprayed in Vietnam to get rid of all of the trees and foliage. And we call it Agent Orange, not because it turns your teeth orange or something like that. It's because the barrels that it was shipped in are orange. And there are 23 of these Superfund sites under where Google is in Silicon Valley. And if you look on the internet, you might find that there's some close to your home as well. And I suspect, based on that heat map, that many of you may actually live close to areas where there's a lot of paraquat. Now, trichloroethylene is a chemical that's been highly associated with a later risk of Parkinson disease. It's commonly used as a degreaser and used in dry cleaning. This has been known. This is a clip from an article in the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, from 1932, talking about the failure to disclose the toxic nature of the chemical that comes in a blue barrel. And so we know this. So banning specific chemicals and pesticides is important. So when we think about P, we think about the prevention, and we should be a little more focused on things that we know based on the science. How about the A for advocate? Well, we have to ask ourselves, what did we learn from diseases like polio and HIV? And we learned quite a lot. And here's the president of the Infantile Paralysis Foundation sitting with Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the White House, and people mailed dimes to the White House. And having a huge advocacy effort like this led to the eradication of polio. It was huge. It caused a tipping point. We don't have enough people doing this in Parkinson right now to get to that tipping point. And they used celebrities, and they had all sorts of people. Eddie Cantor was one of the famous people on his radio show, a comedian. So super important to have a great advocacy effort. HIV has done a better job than Parkinson. This is them putting a condom over the house of Jesse Helms. It says a condom to stop unsafe politics. Helms is deadlier than a virus because he kept voting against HIV legislation. They even seized control of the FDA, silent sit-in, so not the type of insurrection that you saw recently, but they got their point across. They were much more aggressive than we've been in Parkinson. So how did we grade our response? Well, it's been disappointing. I've been doing this since 2006 as the medical director and advisor to the Parkinson's Foundation, which is a great foundation for both education and for research and for all the centers of excellence. But the disease continues to grow unchecked based on our efforts. So we need to get more people involved. And we have a group called the PD Avengers, the Parkinson's Disease Avengers, that you can join. And we have 3,000 members. We aim to have 1 million members at some point. And we've mailed red cards to the White House now. We've mailed 25,000. You can get them at endingpd.com to try to get the word out and get awareness out. And so it's super important that we increase our advocacy. So P is prevent, A is advocate, C is the care part of the equation. And when we think about care, remember I showed you all those people who are living with the diagnosis of Parkinson. And so Dr. Malati and Dr. Deeb, and I think Dr. Stegmuller worked with Dr. Malati while she was at the University of Florida. Dr. Deeb came after. He's now at the University of Massachusetts, leading their Parkinson efforts there. And when we think about caring for people, we have to remember it's not just this old-fashioned sketch from William Gowers in the 1880s. This is a paper from Melissa Armstrong from our group talking about there's a new group of people with Parkinson, and they have all sorts of different symptoms, and many of them lead very good, long lives, and they don't look like this picture. And so we have to think about changing our view as to what Parkinson looks like. And these are all people that are represented in the chapters of that book. It was done with the cookbook company, the Robert Rose Company, to try to get people lots of good advice and things that they can do to try to improve their quality of life, but also to show pictures of real people who are living with the disease. And so there are all sorts of tips and things that we know that we can do, like giving the medicines at the right time. So Joshua Harris said the right thing at the wrong time is the wrong thing. And so we know timing of medicines is absolutely critical in Parkinson. It makes a huge difference for people. We know that if you go to the hospital in Parkinson, it can be dangerous. And Jared Kent said, I have a favorite cemetery I go to because it's really clean and the doctors and nurses are all very nice. And so we have these free hospitalization kits that you can call our helpline at Parkinson's Foundation at 1-800, the number 4 PD info. Probably everyone on here is old enough to know that there are numbers and letters on your telephone keypad. So you just dial 1-800 and then tap out the letters that you can see there, PD info, and you can get these kits that will help you to survive a hospitalization. We know that bad therapy, and I show this especially because Liz Stegmuller is such a great researcher in the area of therapy, but we know bad therapy is actually worse than no therapy. We know that giving bursts of therapy are not ideal. Like if you have a stroke and you get therapy for 6 weeks, that's great. But for Parkinson, you need therapy maybe more spread out and more continuously. And we know things like if you're coughing when you're eating, this should prompt evaluation because you might be swallowing your food down into your lungs, and that may give you a pneumonia. And so there are lots of really important care tips that we need to be sharing. So the C is super important. And then finally, the development of research and treatment. And I just remind you, people are waiting. And in HIV, we put 3 billion, that's billion with the B, dollars into research. It's prevented thousands, if not millions, from ever developing HIV. And in Parkinson, we put in 201 million. So we've been increasing that budget like we asked the Biden White House to do by 10 times. It's still less than what they're putting into HIV per year. And when they put that money into HIV, it really bent the curve and changed that disease. Now, there are all sorts of treatments. I show this one, not because it's my favorite one, it's just one of many treatments, but you see monoclonal antibodies on TV, you see vaccines on TV. We did an op-ed for the Daily Beast of the need for an Operation Warp Speed. We need to put more resources into diseases like Parkinson faster so that we can try to stop this growth and care for these people. But there are vaccines that are being developed, and we don't know if they'll work because we don't know, like in COVID-19, it might prevent or help you to clear the virus. If you clear these plaques, like you get plaques on your teeth, you get plaques on your brain, and Parkinson made of something called synuclein. We don't know if you clear those off, if that's gonna help you in any way. Will it make you symptomatically better? Will it slow disease progression? We don't know that, but you should know that that's an area, the neuroimmunology. So not only is it devices like DBS, but we're looking at the immune system, we're looking at diets, we're looking at inflammation. So there's lots of cool things that are going on. We're even shooting light into the brains of animals and trying to combine what we know about genetics and engineering and optics to try to control the way that different circuits are talking to each other in the brain. And we're using techniques like what has been done in cancer to try to activate certain regions with designer drugs and develop models of this in animals. And so, you should know that there's quite a lot going on, but $200 million a year is not going to do it. We're going to need 2 billion or 3 billion, like what we're seeing in HIV. And then we need to develop a biomarker. And so this is from David Valancourt's work. I think Elizabeth knows David Valancourt very well. And this is a recent grant that's funded from him, but looking at markers in the imaging. So this is MR imaging. And could we develop a marker? This is called free water imaging. So we could tell if somebody has Parkinson, but also could we track the Parkinson over time? And that's going to be critical, because if we can track it and have a marker for tracking, then we may be able to reduce the number of people we need in studies from thousands to hundreds and get more therapies out to the people that need them quickly. So with that, that is a little 20-minute tour of Parkinson, both thinking about the prescription for action and what we might do to lessen our burden of Parkinson, and tips about living with it. Feel free to tweet me, anytime, or email me if you have questions. And then I also wanted to leave some time for questions for you. And this is my email at okun@neurology.ufl.edu. And Elizabeth knows I share that with everyone. So if you want to tweet or send me messages or email me, happy to help in any way that I can. So with that, I'm going to try to unshare my screen and answer any questions.
All right. Thank you so much. That was amazing. I always learn something new. Even, you think you're right on top of things, and I always learn something new when I listen to you speak. So thank you so much, Dr. Okun. And if you all can't tell, he's amazing. That's all I can say. Wonderfully supportive, and just a great advocate for and neurologist. So thank you for sharing your time with us.